was able to get my hands on an 8mm camera at one point. A friend of mine had it. And I shot a little silly film on the rooftops of the Lower East Side back, I think, in 1962 or so. But the very idea of making a film, a narrative film, even though I was aware of all the excitement around me, and maybe because of that, too, the excitement of the American underground cinema, the American avant-garde, European avant-garde, all these things were developing and were being available now, that cinema could be anything. Cinema was anything, you make it. All these things fed the desire to make a narrative film. I wanted to make a narrative film. And when I finally saw the film Shadows by John Cassavetes, I think it was 1959 or 1960, what it proved to us was that if you had a desire to tell a story as strongly as he had, and you were able to break away, or not even be encumbered, should I say, not be encumbered by a studio system, a way of the industry way of making a film with a very big crew, very, very heavy equipment, and that was stopping the creative impulse in a way. So what happened was that there was very lightweight equipment. This enabled the filmmakers like Cassavetes, like Shirley Clark, like many others, to be able to just open up the field and shoot almost as if you have today, for example, an iPhone would be a similar thing. And so these became truly, truly independent films. You realize there were no more excuses. If they were able to make a film this way in New York, in 16mm, the camera didn't have a tripod and that sort of thing. Very, very little lighting, maybe none. There's no excuse now. You have to be able to do it. But the only thing you need, and this is the most important thing, is the spark and the desire and the passion to say something utilizing film. It turns out that and it's difficult to try to say encompass all of this, but there are many different aspects, different kinds of films that I was inspired by. Cassavetes' work within the scenes with the people, who happen to be actors, but with the people, gave it a sense of authenticity and life that it felt like it was going to live off the screen. The screen couldn't inhabit it, just couldn't hold it. But the Cassavetes thing was to explore that life and push it to the edge and still try to keep, if you're so inclined, a particular narrative and storyline and see if I can combine it all. It wasn't intentional that way, but that's what I felt. Because of the extraordinary technology around us at this point, I mean, people talk about the fact that anyone can make a film. It's true. Anyone can express themselves in visual images. But what's happening, one has to remember, is that technology is a tool. The same principles apply, which is your need to tell that story, your need to go through the process. And you happen to be using digital as opposed to film or an iPhone, I have no idea. But the key thing is that the technology does not dictate the art. The art dictates the technology. The art comes first, and you use the technology for the art, whatever that art may be, you know. And I think there's a misconception today that because of the equipment does it. Easily done. You could press a button and you have different sorts of visual effects. I learned this back with the Steadicam, back during Raging Bull. I had designed fight sequences in the film, 9 of them, in very, very specific ways, so much so that they were all drawn images. I have storyboards for everything and designs and outlines and diagrams of the choreography of the fights themselves. And myself and the cinematographer worked out the camera moves. That is the physical, actual use of the equipment at that time with no video assist, none of that sort of thing we have today. So for my director of photography, Chapman, it did take longer than we thought to create these images that you see in those fight scenes because of the nature of the equipment, and which means that it took, we had planned 5 weeks to shoot the fight scenes, it took 10. There was one fight scene that I thought we would do with this new instrument called the Steadicam, and we started shooting it. I did not design the shots. I just used the sense of the element that I thought the Steadicam would give me. And after shooting for a day, I realized there is no way of getting around the design. In other words, the technology of this beautiful instrument was not going to direct the film for me. Something else was happening, and I scrapped it all and reshot it. And of course, used the Steadicam for the long takes that are in the film, and then eventually understood the nature of it to the point where we were able to do that long take, for example, in Goodfellas, which goes into the Copacabana. But I have relied on this new technology to create a certain aspect of cinema which was still mysterious to me. And I realized at that point that I still had to be there. You know, it wasn't going to do it for me. I wanted to see what that equipment gives me, but I still have to direct the equipment and know what the equipment is capable of, what I can use it for. So this is a very important point. The issue of technology carries over particularly into the post-production too, in the editing itself of a film, or of a visual narrative, so to speak. In the days when we first started, of course, it was a separate track and picture. If one wanted to make a dissolve or see a call for a dissolve or call for any special effect, you had to do a temp, so to speak. It had to go to a lab. Very often we didn't see these dissolves until the film was finished. But in this case, what's happening now is that it's kind of exciting because you can see these different elements pretty much immediately with the computer editing. Many different effects can be seen and experienced right away, so that you could react immediately to it. Yet there is a drawback, and that is the immediate nature of it. Very often I found that once we made the switch from editing in 35 millimeter to computer, I found that discussing how to make a change in a scene, what we were used to would take maybe 25, 30 minutes or so. As they're working on that change, splicing film, cutting, syncing up, or whatever they were doing, you'd think about it, possibly, or at least if you weren't thinking about it, you were in the presence of the change, in a sense. You were experiencing the travel, in a way, from one version to the other. And at a certain point, when we started using the computer, I'd ask for a change, say, why don't we try this, why don't we try that? And within 2 to 3 minutes, it was done. And so I had to learn to do without that process, a very valuable process of another way of filmmaking, of waiting and absorbing what you're doing. This was something else, and it threw me for quite a while because it was immediate. And almost at a certain point, because one is able to do this with the technology, there may be too many choices. And what I began to understand is that one has to steel yourself against all these choices somehow and learn how to, how should I put it, tame them in a way. And that the only way to do that is to keep focused on what you want to say, you see. And so the extraneous, cutting away the extraneous, sometimes it works for me, sometimes it doesn't. But it is a different, it's a different medium this way in terms of cutting that quickly and having everything at your fingertips at this point. I always think it's interesting because if you have everything at your fingertips and in such rate of speed, then you really are committed to the essence of what you're doing, you know? There's no excuse to say, I've got to wait for this or I've got to wait for that. You really have to know what you're doing, even more so.